Alright, hey everybody, Mobile Rager. So I want to do something a little different for this video. Cause the thing that I've noticed has really been the case for like the past 2-ish years. Oh, long time, frankly. There's not really a lot of like the informative type videos. Like 90% of the videos of this game are just like, gameplay. The top creators. I say top creators with air quotes you can't see because like the most popular people do this game have like 5,000 subscribers. It's not a particularly popular game, to be perfectly honest. But that doesn't mean the people don't need to know. The people who play this game, is presumably people who would be interested in a video like this. At least I hope there is. Because as a player of this game, I tell you there's plenty of teams in this that suck. Now, I'm gonna get into it right now. Well, I'm gonna get into it in a second. But I decided to take the liberty upon myself, because I don't really see anybody else doing it. Sort of fill in the gaps on those informative videos. I mean, I'm sure there are people who know this game better than me, so, if you want to make the argument the dunkers or the secretly A tier best war bomb ever, then no, that's the shooters. The dunkers over here. Okay, see, I don't know this. I don't even know this game. So if you want to make the argument down in the comments that, this should be there or whatever. Try not to like touch anything so the image doesn't explode on me. But get a little more in depth with it. These are obviously, as I hope you've been able to tell by now, these are organized by theme, not necessarily every toon individually ranked. That's not really how they're used in the game. Aside from certain things like Holiday or some of our S tier compatriots, there's some of the A tier ones too, Duckamuck and that, and the like. There's not really a ton of plug and play characters. Maybe some of the other plug and play characters, like I'm opening all the wrong things on my computer right now. Usually the other plug and play character, like Pandemonium, really only works in the context of like teams that use more big crit damage. But eh. So this is every theme. I did double check last time I did this because I've done this a couple times. I originally made this video a month ago. I was doing reformatting and I just cut like 3 teams off the list. They just weren't there anymore. So they're all added back in their proper place. Things have moved around. But since you haven't seen the other tier lists, doesn't really matter. So jumping into the actual placement of things, we got the D tier, and these things that explain about the D tier is essentially the fake themes. The ones that don't count. Like the things like explorers, heroes, the actual cop tag, which I decided to make Pandemonium separate of because there's literally only 2 of them in the entire game for whatever reason. But, they're not real. Like, aside from scouts, which is the only thing that come close to a theme here, but so horribly outdated that they don't get to count. I mean, same goes for like farmers, but like staff Wild West don't even have synergy with each other. Just random tunes in the region. You're not gonna find these tags in kits. It's kind of probably the one distinguishing feature of an actual team. Because realistically, you know, how much of a notch above is like half of the members of the citizens? The answer, not really. You know. Something like OG Lola. No, no. Maniac. If you ever built up to any like reasonable degree. Yeah. And jumping into C tier, we've sort of, we have real teams here. Knights, showbiz, wrestlers, all that jazz. They're just the teams that aren't particularly good. They're bad. The real teams that are bad. That's what this tier is. you know, Knights. It's not really hard to explain. Their healer sucks. Their gimmick doesn't really work. I mean, Bugs the Brave's efficient enough. I mean, he like 20% relies on a gimmick, but you know, so yeah, that's fair. Scoundrels. Now, admittedly, damage over time is in a somewhat interesting point in the meta. Because admittedly, most of these teams are bad, but not all of these teams are strictly unusable. Like, you can still do things, magic, egghead banish shenanigans. They're just not as relevant or as easy as they used to be. A long time ago, Explorer tunes like Treasure Under Tweety and Professor Prissy were pretty relevant to the old stop team, but it's just not as important anymore. Yeah, it's simple as. His main appeal was like a cheap war bomb, but not exactly. You look at all the amount of images on this screen right now. Not exactly in dire need of things that can win in wars. So yeah, nice list. Easy to explain. They got horribly outclassed in the one thing they're supposed to do. Really fast. Like, Jungle Squad isn't even really that great outside of solid Tidden to begin with. And then the Assassins came out, and they could just do every R&D at the time. It was like, oh, okay, cool, so now I don't even have to care. I guess there's really only 2 R&D bosses at launch, but beating 50% of them might feel important, but there's 4 of them at this point, and in addition to things that are like, their reworks a year ago were really underwhelming. fact that they got technically nerfed for some reason. I mean, the team isn't good. You don't have to worry about, 4 turns of sure dodge. It's not that big of a deal. So yeah, it was like anything they could do, they can't really do anymore. Well, I mean, they can, but it's like, why would you use them for it, Uh, shooters, they're kind of just B tier dunkers. Or, they're not B tier dunkers. The players dunkers aren't B tier. They're like B grade dunkers. They're the dunker ripoffs. And admittedly, dunkers aren't even strictly doing that hot. Like, I guess what it comes down to is a lot of how both of these teams work are built off LeBron, but he can't be on both of them at once. So why not just use him with the better one? I mean, yeah, there's Shooter Daffy, but it's okay. If pretending Shooter Daffys are, some sort of rebuttal is like, I don't know. I was gonna do some wacky metaphor, but then I realized the best thing I got was saying me getting in a better mode this morning was an accomplishment. Maybe, maybe at the time I did, but whatever. I'm losing track of whatever thread I had going. Showbiz. I'd almost say they're D tier. Like, this is a list of teams that barely even that kind of don't qualify as complete teams in the first place. Like, they do, but they don't because they're not usable. They're not practically usable. I guess I would say they're luxury, but it's more realistic to just say that they're bad. And Showbiz are, in my opinion, the worst team that has a legendary. So, make of that as what you will. Okay, man, that's right next to Circus, the team with like 4 turn warm ups. So they can't use any of their actual abilities until the battle's already over. I would also mention things like stat creep, but stat creep kind of applies to all of the tunes in this category. It's sort of why they're in here to begin with. Like, if there were teams a little mediocre, but had decent enough stats to be used, they'd be in B tier. But they're not. So, you can see how the math on that one would work out. Cyber, sort of the same dealio. I mean, M4 is pretty usable. You know, arguably the jank mechanics, but he's also the only one of them that's dual tagged to Mastermind. Unless Egghead was, but the other two weren't out, so they aren't. So, if you want to be technical, you just say he's one of the S tier tunes over here, and he doesn't count for Cyber. The rest of the team, I saw uses for them. Like, I saw people use some Hawk R&D, a year ago. When, beating R&D was a challenge. Less stat creep for him. Citizens there, I originally had them in B tier the last time I did this. Lord knows why. Maybe I was using the Citizen's flag as a surrogate for Pouncers, but the Pouncers aren't really that good either. Because the only real things that are in Citizens at this point that aren't more closely associated with another thing. Their general flow seems to be assist, but also kind of not. Now, Citizens very confused. Like, you got the Pouncers going on, you've got Petunia going on, you got Speedy in there for some reason. But I've also heard the Toon devs say they could just put him on another team. Which, I'd be accustomed for. I don't really think he makes much sense as a citizen in the first place. So, fine by me, but it's like. It's sort of like another tag on this list, Hunters, which had/have so many weird, like, sort of, I guess, leftover tunes from when, the theme structures weren't so rigid. Synergy between teams wasn't strictly as important. That's kind of what Citizens are like. Yes, the places of the OG Tazes, the birthday suit Tweeties, where it's like, what do I do with this? I mean, Tweety's newer. He has actual stats, and has a more defined role. He has, the fabled assist type tune. There's a few deal of those, including former citizen Kitty Kitty, but there's better assist teams, and there's better general assist tunes. Like, yes, sure, you could, concoct some sort of citizen-based assist team with, BST, Speedy, whatever. I mean, you have the fundamentals of one. But there's better assist teams to use. So I can't say that I see the point. Now moving on to Magic. Magic is actually a decent team, One of the Magic tunes is a tune that literally just kills people. It's not hard to see why that would be appealing. It's just that they don't have the numbers. They're a bit too easily, like, counter pushed. I think the original draft did this like 6 months ago or a year or whatever. I gave them some props because they beat Warriors or something. They played something really weird. Something odd, but it's not the same game anymore. I mean, I still put Warriors in S tier, but like, they're not exactly hard to beat, except in the one game mode where it actually matters. But we'll get to them later. We're on the C tier ones. So I just find it a little tricky to be reasonably using them. That's just support. I mean, I guess there's Genie Bugs, but really Genie Bugs has its own sort of issues. Because either you use Alchemist, who does nothing, or or you use Genie and get to do things for about 3 turns. thrilling. Snow bunnies. They kind of weren't a real team to begin with, and they just I don't know what they have going on. It's like things like their only support for a while before they moved Lola or Summit Lola. Even though they intentionally didn't move Summit Lola before, then they just decided on a whim. Yep, this is the place she belongs. Move her from one dead team to a second. I mean, admittedly, outlaws have gotten buffed at this point, so revisionist history says she just stayed an outlaw. But I get why she'd be there. Why she was there. She's a rabbit. She was Summit. She was, quite frankly, a better support than Taurus Daffy. But I'd argue this pretty much almost doesn't even have anything to do with the team. Because they don't have stats. They don't really do anything. It's like they're kind of chili based, but not particularly. I guess as much as the other Summit tunes that came out around that time. But it's not very good. They'd be the worst team in the game. I would think they're worse than Showbiz if they had a legendary, but they don't. So, did you be? And then, Wrestlers up next. Back in the ye old prehistoric days of before Champs Arena, they were solid enough. They had the stats. They sort of had the core game mode where they hung out and were annoying. But, yeah, the lack of numbers really does a lot for them. I think they beat Warriors in the game. I actually don't remember. What I do know is I don't think they've been featured in Arena since. And they kind of got a lot of things going against them. I mean, their support's kind of whatever. Well, the whole team's kind of whatever at this point. I mean, even to begin with, Realm Bago, kind of a mediocre support. But I guess it's sort of a recurring theme on this list. I mean, Show Up His Bugs might be one of the worst supports in the game. I mean, at least something like Fisher Cat has a move that heals. you know? But yeah, wrestlers, not really a place in the meta. Certainly not anymore. Moving on to gangsters. The thing with gangsters is there's one, maybe two. Like, there's one real tune in it, like two half real tunes, and then two wastes of development time. Like, Rocky and Muggsy blow hard. They are horrible. They, for the tunes who are supposed to solidify whatever the hell's going on with the gangsters. So again, long time ago in the great, before the great Pangea split of things like villains and outlaws and all that jazz. The big cheese was, like using Dawn on Cannoneer type assist teams. Boom, boom, boom. And it's very entertaining. Well, also efficient. I mean, that's the more important part than it being entertaining. But you know, and you can still use Dawn for those things. But I make the counter argument of why. Because I remember back in the heyday of Babyface, he was a real defensive annoyance. Offensively pretty good, because, he'd stun your O'Hare back when he was on literally everything in the entire world. But, you know, games got more technical, I guess. Probably getting that arena exclusive skill. I haven't been in arena for a while. Also, not sure O'Hare has either. Not that I don't know if, though admittedly I don't know if he'd strictly be an issue at this point. I guess it depends on what meta you put him in. I mean, they had to take the Aristos out of this last season, but it was like 75% unbuffed teams. Because again, pros on the fall list, like 3 months ago, when they weren't buffed and were terrible, they were in C. You weren't doing much with them. But now, they moved on up in the world. So, and like baseball probably could be completely truthful. Probably a B tier team. But the fact that they needed to get buffed, and he's still not that great. Like, it's a team that came out, that finished like 3 months ago. And they had to be buffed. And I still wouldn't say they're better than B tier. They're C tier in spirit. A new team shouldn't be this unusable. Even something as, quite frankly, mediocre as like folklore, they did not feel the need to get buffed. Even though they had a spiritual debuff by, having an epic battle pass tune. But, they get points off for being bad enough to be buffed and then still not be good. And moving on, villains. I actually don't remember if I elaborated on the deity point that I made earlier. I try not to be all over the place because I still haven't really explained my criteria at this point, and we're like 25 minutes into the video. Almost 30 actually. But if you want a quick rundown of the criteria, yeah, balance offense and defense. The accessibility comes in to a degree. And realistically, most of these teams aren't ranked something like that. I mean, I put Nightmare in A, but hide bugs is impossible. If I had to give unlock numbers on that tune, I'd probably say 2,000 at best. Of course, I I would have no way of telling. You know, more popular games have had less popular characters, so I wouldn't be surprised if I'm highballing it significantly. Alright, new estimate, like 250. I don't know how many people are actively playing this game at any moment. I just assume it's a sort of an older IP. There's some sort of like, I don't know, hidden Facebook community. It's more lenient on this game or something, or people who aren't even online with it at all, really. They sort of play. Maybe they talk to their alliance, but as far as I'm concerned, it's like a owning high bugs is like having a white whale in your house. Anyways, getting back on track. The DOT point. It's in an odd state with the game because it's sort of just it's interesting because it's something that's like it scales very well because it's max health base as far as I know. It's something it's to a pretty high margin too. It was something like 10% or whatever, maybe more. It's something like Scoundrels where it's like 8 DOT and they just get stunned and die forever. Well, surely this team has to be good. Stats perhaps may be poor, but they can stack the DOTs fast enough. But the splits kind of is the issue, because both of these teams independently aren't that great. To be perfectly honest, I mean, I guess full Scoundrels are arguably better than full Villains at this point, because excuse me, they have the stun, the Villains don't. But in generally, they're both not really that great. I mean, you can use Scoundrel to get wins in war against stuff like your dodge teams that normally might be a pickle, or you've run out of you've used your 3 best real counters. Wheel out the overinvested Scoundrels; they'll take care of it. But other teams could do a lot more without tune-up 48, 7 CS, level 16 gadgets. Like, could you use a lot of these teams? Yeah, I mean, something like really the athletes and the hunters and the circuses here. No, there is no benefit of the doubt for them. But at the same time, unless I demote these teams to F tier or something, I create a new D tier out of the strictly bad teams. The Scoundrels are not on the same level as even the artists. Sort of a team of their ilk of old team that manages to hang around, just be chill. You could still use your artists. You can use Scoundrels, but it's significantly more work than using artists. I guess the angle that I had to take on it. Again, that's the thing you think I'm thinking I'm undervaluing them, maybe, but I don't know, man. I don't know. So moving on to the B tier ones, is the ones that I would describe as the perfectly okay. The I need an extra bomb or war or fill out a tower kind of teams. Like if I had a, well, actually, I have built some of these teams. But I was like, oh, I can't clear 415 of Grainy Doom Tower. You know, I gotta wheel somebody up. That's where a lot of these go. You know, like prehistoric. You know, they're interesting because obviously they've been stabbed pretty hard. I mean, of the time of the Warriors, you know, what I mean by that is like on their first release, they're like the second highest base power team in the game. Now they're like the footnote. They're like towards the bottom. Yeah, I'd say most of the teams in that tier out tier them in stats. But still not strictly terrible. I mean, if you thought the prehistoric defense crates, you know, they could be a little bit of a pickle. I mean, obviously those ones have kind of artificially inflated stats. I don't know if you get a real prehistoric team to like 900k power. Certainly not easily. But not approach it. I'd say you could get 700k. Yeah, the extra gadgets and all. Yeah, yeah, sure. But you know, they are serviceable. Now pirates, they're neat. You know, they have the whole anti-dodge niche with Seago and Sam, and they do the assist thing with Dread Pirate and Cannoneer. Uh, I don't know, Barrelhawk's there. He's sort of just there in lieu of a tune that would do something else. Because again, I don't really need anything else for the team, to be perfectly honest. I mean, sure, you get a Dawn or BST if you wanted to try and get a second go, I guess. But the idea is that you don't need it. Is that just half the enemy team is dead already by the time, like, Sam gets his turn. So, you know, you don't really need them. Next, we have Vintage, which I've heard are decently annoying in War and Arena. Admittedly, this is an interesting point I'll bring up, sort of about the dodge trio over here, I guess. I mean, you could throw folklore in there too, but they have sturdy, and that complicates things a lot more than the dodge does. The idea I'm trying to get at is, despite how prevalent anti-dodge is, a fair deal of it is particularly good. You know, it's like even teams like Showbiz would have Michigan's random dodge cleanse, but you know that doesn't really stop them. If anything on this team would stop an artists or bullfighters, it would be the stun. Like it would be their unresistible stuns. Well, actually, their stuns are perfectly resistible because the Showbiz leadership skill is subject to spaghetti code. But yeah, let's pretend that it isn't. It's the stuns that would be the significantly more prevalent issue for them if they were a real team. But they're not. But, you know, the idea that I'm trying to get at is the dodge teams work better as complement to each other in some sort of way. You wouldn't want to do it in war. Have people build all of the dodge teams and put them on defense because you could probably just statistically outpower something like artists. But yeah, the idea is if you have all three of them on some hypothetical defense somewhere, it sort of become harder to deal with because, like, okay, you use the pirates against artists or whatever, or pirates against bullfighters. You could do it either way. Get the idea of they just kind of keep coming out, and it's like, well, now what? It's like, okay, you use the pirates against the bullfighters, and you use the lunar bugs. I don't know. And see, I mean, like, maybe there just isn't enough anti-dodge counter secretly, or at least the ones that are good and work. Cause like, all right, boys, we got the artists. Unless they want to waste a stun team like professionals, I've done that battle. It does work, even with like Tizinski. Any combo of the main five artists will do it. You know, pros still win, but it's like, do you want to use your pros on that? Not particularly. At least in my opinion. If there was something I think the pros could more reasonably be, yeah, I take him up against the higher caliber threat. There's some big dog zombies team or something. They're like, yeah, pros could probably do that. I'm gonna use the pros for that instead, rather than to beat bullfighters. But that's kind of the idea. It's like, what do you do against bullfighters then? Not that much. So even though they're kind of, again, sort of like shooters, B grade artists, they can work. Especially on offense. If this team can't really do anything against dodge, they just lose. You got Nautilus. Their tower team. Tower teams are really interesting because A, there's like 3 of them. And B, they're sort of inconsistent. Because at least from what I remember, Nautilus used to be in 2 towers. I don't know if they are anymore. But what I do remember is I don't think the same luxury was afforded to Merrymen and Samurai. So, it was very strange. But, again, they can beat things and more. Yeah, they're definitely good in those towers. I don't know, might be able to beat a safe battle or 2 for you. you know, that's kind of what you would want out of them, right? I feel like we're getting into the proper luxury stuff in B tier. Oh, of course, something like artists are just wildly useful to scale. Tune-up 30 artists will do a lot more than certain tune-up 45 teams. So they're not luxury. They sound better than B tier, but in the real game, they sort of curb off hard. They're a good beginner team. And they're not unusable in the late game. But they're not particularly usable in the late game. Because they're the team every dodge counter is designed to beat. And I guess it's sort of the same idea with a lot of these B tier teams. Because Yeah, I've been going on for a minute. I'm gonna have to have to save some time here. I don't know. The Opera used to be in C tier. I promoted them because they they do stuff enough. I guess they have numbers, and that's the arguably more important part. The kit's still not particularly well designed, in my opinion, but they win battles. They can, I mean, they could beat warriors outside of war. So yippee. I mean, robots. I guess they know their fourth member, Pandemonium, actually makes a decent fourth member for him. But like the Outlaws, they probably work. They're also a war defense team for some reason. Uh, Strange, but you could do the taunt bomb thing if you really wanted to. With Outlaw Foghorn and Outlaw Sylvester. I will say Outlaw Sylvester is arguably a better healer than the team's actual two real healers. I mean, I don't even know if Queso got buffed. He probably did. Still, I don't think I'd use him over Beaky, and I probably wouldn't even use Beaky over Sylvester. Um, yeah, moving on. And Dunkers work. Orisa's Heartthrob beats counter. Yeah, they have pretty bad stats, but they can do a couple of things. Yeah, the boxers and Divine, they sort of exist. I guess Divine technically got slightly worse with their buffs. He, what you could argue is their core mechanic of abusing Enary AoEs with revives doesn't really work anymore. We got capped. To be honest, V tier is kind of my default tier of I don't really know what to do with this team. Yeah, I don't know where to put them. Like Go Kart, the last two members are super new, super uber duper new. Something like Folklore is also pretty new, relatively. I certainly don't have them up very ranked. Guess I've seen a lot of other people do the same. Or most other people are like me in that regard. Uh, yeah, I don't know. I've seen Rainbow Bird Beaky on some decent enough defenses. Not really enough to like change the outcome of the battle, but he was annoying. Good job, I guess. Unlikely heroes are technically unfinished. They said they were designed to be a duo, and they do similar things with Nightmare of countering revive teams. Like the dramatic overkill of Divine. I guess realistically, you'd probably want to beat horror zombies with them, because they have the anti-horror and zombies mechanics TM. They also have anti-nightmare mechanics. It's very strange for tunes they almost energize with, but sure. And they are monsters, I guess. Samurai. Sylvester sucks. They have the C tier problem of the support that quite frankly just isn't good. but the rest of the team's decent enough. I mean, you could throw him with pretty much the only member of the Merrymen that's worth a damn. Is with Daffy Hood's famous hidden blast. Uh, that it works. I guess put him and like Hector maybe together. I've seen it operational enough as in arena defense this season. I got Imperials kind of offense only degree. I guess my biggest condemnation of the Imperials is they have to get a 3,000 piece tune so they don't crumple over and die at a strong gust of wind. Because Conqueror is just not really a great tank at this point. But like, as well as the thing, somewhat of the issue with Lola is without Daffy, the team doesn't really have a lot of its engine. Because he's sort of the only real member of the team to deal damage. But they have the whole, locking passives together. Because sure, the intention was, you're sort of not supposed to use them together. You don't want to do the two legendary team. That's overkill, right? But then don't have Conqueror Taz have the defensive profile of wet paper bag. Then that's how you make that happen. Or you don't release a second legendary for the team at all. Okay, two terrible 300 piece Lola tunes. Mediocre. Mediocre is a better term. Two mediocre 3,000 piece Lola tunes. I would say is not something this game really needs. Alright, jumping into A tier. I'll call it a preliminary placement because Daffy All Stars is getting buffed. I mean, obviously, it's the theme with SPD in it. So, sure, but again, you can make the mastermind argument I made for M4. So, yeah. Although that's kind of not really the team he's supposed to be on, because again, you could apply the same, not double legendary argument to them as well. But yeah, their war offense of the question mark, war in general. To be honest, SPD is the only member of that team I have ranked up, and I just use them with my mastermind. So I haven't put a lot of the whole thought category into the actual team of the Daffy All Stars. I thought Captain Daffy, when he came out, would not be a great member for the pirate team, and he isn't. I'd argue he still isn't. I guess that's not really what he's designed to do. I mean, that's certainly not what the other members of the team do. So, I'll call it preliminary, and maybe their buffs will justify them being an A tier. Because again, I can make the baseball argument of a team that could be A tier should be B tier because they're a new-ish. I mean, SPD's like 9 months old at this point. But newish team. Needing to be buffed, but they'd also get dunked on with the Nerf hammer. And the other team, like the other two members of the team, were kind of whatever. Two new members, I guess. I mean, it's better than what OG Daffy was doing at the time. I'll tell you that much. But yeah, let's moving on. Nightmare. They seem pretty solid as an offensive tool generally. They have the whole health steal thing going on, so they'll carve through your sturdy teams, all two and a half of them. So that's nice. I haven't really seen enough of them on defense to justify them anywhere else, because, like, it's something like the team right next to them, Fiends, probably the best offensive team in the game, but, they're pretty terrible on defense. So, I mean, unless you're me, whenever I see Fiends and Crate, I default and turn my brain off, and then, I lose the battle, but that's just me. I just said 5 minutes ago that I refuse to think playing this game. Oh, how long is recording this? Okay, I'm reaching the hour threshold. I'm not gonna waste your guys' time. Victory, pretty good defense, damage immunity, annoying. A lot of teams can't deal with it. If Super Tunes, which are here, totally, had them be the most annoying team in the game if they had modern stats, but they don't. Wacky, sort of a secondary flip team. Sorry, excuse me. Secondary flip team, like Masterminds. Cool, I guess. Holidays in an interesting position because they have one tune that's probably S tier, two tunes that are probably B tier, and then two tunes that are D tier for I don't even know if they belong to the tag at this point. I mean, that's really a tag with synergy in the first place, but the point that I'm getting at is O here is doing a lot of heavy lifting, so I split the medium between S and B for A. You got sort of horror and zombies being of the similar thing. I mean, for the 2 weeks Rotting worked on R&D bosses, they're the secret best R&D team in the game. But that got patched, so now they're just a pretty good offensive tool. That's technically, I guess it's more a luxury of if you don't have the rest of your nightmares built, because unless you also have the resources for blood count, you'd probably rather use Zombie Sam and Horror, to be honest. That's what I'm doing with them. Anyhow. For how terrible the season was, the zombie events weren't too... That's probably not accurate to say. They were bad, they were just deceptively okay in gaining pieces for the rest of the team. There you go, that's a better way of saying it. And then Lunar, I originally had them in S tier for some bizarre reason, but they're absolutely terrible on defense. I mean, you, remove Toro's taunt, or you stun him for, one turn, or you have, a mildly consistent source of flip, and they can do nothing. They can do nothing. Their whole gimmick, I guess, It's probably a gimmick at this point because they have pretty poor stats. As well as there's also the random lunar Toro nerf that didn't happen when I originally made this and was not my catalyst for moving them down to 8 tier. It was just, you know, why? Because I guess I will jump the gun. And the most important thing the S tier teams have going for them is they're pretty decent on both offense and defense. I don't technically know how to feel about half of them. But people still talk about aristocrats at this point, like 4 months after their nerf and like 8 months after their buffs. I mean, the fact that they arguably didn't need them at that point was crazy. Just shows to go how, frankly, stacked these two teams are under the hood. Because, admittedly, Warriors, the main thing they have going on, aside from being sort of pretty solid in like every game mode, use them fine in towers, use them fine in safes. They're at a point where they're kind of being stat crept, which is funny because they were the original arbiter of stat creep. Like, pre-Warriors, most teams were roughly as good as each other. I mean, there was like a pretty mild incline, and then there was giant heart jump. There's like a heart attack and spike. And then the game never recovered. If you were to treat it as a heart monitor. You could argue the game hasn't recovered in other ways too. What? But yeah, I think I've lost any point I could be making on these these characters at some point. I somehow spent like 20, 30 minutes before even escaping C tier. So I'm gonna move on. Just, one things with the build. This video arguably isn't even that. Because certain things are more accessible than others. Does tier list suck? You know what? Leave it. Okay. On the Lore Rager, leave a comment below if I'm actually secretly stupid and this tier list sucks. Because I spent an hour talking about nothing. Toymaker Marmon, he denies your taunt from existence. Yippee, Dark Matter Revive. I'm not sure why. I don't know. Mastermind's good on defense. Victory would probably also be S tier if that's my justification. Others suck a little on offense. I'm the mobile rager. I don't know what I'm talking about anymore. That's all, folks.